Paul Gilman, welcome once more to La Voz Latina, brother.
How you guys doing out there?
Fantastic, Paul, fantastic, and it's so glad to have you on La Voz Latina once again. And for people who are not familiar with you, Paul, I think you have a degree in communications. You also have a degree in
From
history. Yes,
my degree in communications is from CUNY BMCC, Borough Manhattan Community College,
and you
working
also have
class
a
college in downtown Manhattan.
history degree, I believe, right?
Yep, in CUNY Queens College.
And you're also a member of the Bronx Greens, right?
Yes, and chapter of Green Party of New York.
And you're not
Uh,
you're not one of those right wing Greens. You're one of those Marxist Leninist Greens. I understand.
Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, marijuanist.
Yeah, we'll talk about sometime about what you've been planting. I understand that you've been planting some green stuff up there. And
Yeah, I did some Bronx Gold. Even though I did the Bronx Gold, I grew one big giant female plant. It came out pretty good. It's not the same as high-powered hydroponic, but it's all organic, no pesticides, no GMO, and it gets the job done in a very pleasant way.
okay, but today, Paul Gilman on the Voz Latina, we are going to talk about the war that is shaking the ground, literally the earth, and that is Ukraine. And Paul Gilman, there's a lot of division among the left in this country. Unlike the Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War, everybody on the left, or so-called left, were against the war and against U.S. intervention there, and clearly anti-imperialist positions, and many socialists and so on. But in this Ukrainian situation, we have a large number, probably the majority, that are against the way that the United States is supporting militarily Ukraine. But we also have a lot of people on the left that consider that that support is necessary because Ukraine is being invaded. So what is your position on this situation on the Ukrainian war? It's very complicated. We're not we're trying to see if we could learn something rather than offend anybody, and just
Oh,
everybody left and right to see if what we could learn with you.
oh, I wanted to offend some people.
Okay, let's go. Start offending.
All right. Well, let's start with Howie Hawkins. Howie
Okay.
Hawkins was the Green Party candidate for president. He's now for sending weapons to the Zelensky government. The left Greens and most of the left is against the Zelensky government because it's a puppet regime of U.S. imperialism.
That's the position of Howie Hawkins, and who is Howie Hawkins for people who do not know?
Well, I said before, he is the last candidate for president of the Greens,
Right.
the 2020 candidate.
Right.
And he ran for governor. He got the Green Party of New York ballot status two elections in a row.
Right.
And when he's just taught, he was great as a candidate for governor because when it comes to domestic issues, he's pretty good. He's on point.
Right.
When it comes to foreign policy, he's about as right wing as the Biden administration is.
Well,
He actually believes this is a war based on protecting Ukrainian sovereignty and right to self determination. And so, if that were true, he would make a point. But it's not true because the people who are arming the Zelensky government is the U.S. imperialism. They put him there in a coup d'etat in 2014, and he's their puppet. As of now, the Ukraine is a puppet of U.S. imperialism, and there's no right of self-determination. We don't know if the Ukrainian people would have voted to poke the Russian bear by having NATO in there. We don't really know that because the fascists came in 2014, set up the Zelensky government.
when you say the fascists came in, there are listeners who do not know what you mean by the fascists came in 2014.
Well,
What was it that
they
happened in 2014, please?
they call it the hard right. It's basically the Azov battalion which is like a neo-Nazi battalion. It's now moved up to, I guess, regiment. And them, and there's other far right groups. Their names escape me right now, but they went in there and they have they want
But
to
what did
ethnically.
they do? What did they? You say they went in there. What they won
Well,
elections
yeah,
or
I was
they?
about to say so. They wanted to ethnically cleanse the Ukraine
But
of
I no no
all
but no I'm going no,
Russian.
no let's go back. There was a government that was had been democratically elected, I do believe, no, in
Yeah, it was
Ukraine, and I believe there was a
the
Ukrainian president by the name of Viktor Yanukovych.
Yanukovych. He was
Yanukovych,
elected before then,
right?
and so the CIA and the State Department of the U.S. got involved, and there's actually a phone call of one of our State Department leaders, Victoria Nuland, talking with other people in the Ukraine on who they should make the president.
Wow.
One such person they were considering was Vitaly Klitschko, who was a light heavyweight champion boxer, and they actually took him, and he's still there. He's the mayor of I guess Kiev or something like that.
But in any
You
case,
know,
there was a coup d'état, and then the fascists, these people that were fascists, took over. Right? That's what happened. Then I understand.
they took over, and then Biden got in there, and Biden said, the Russians said, look, we're drawing a line in the sand. If you put NATO and nuclear weapons in the Ukraine, then we're going to have to do something about it. And of course, Biden 2 days later said that, okay, well, that's not negotiable. NATO's going in there. You don't have a choice. The government we put in there, they claim it was represented the people of Ukraine. We don't really know if it does or doesn't, because who knows in the coup, some people are right wing, some people are, and some people just don't know any better. And he said that our President Biden said that we're going to put nukes eventually in Ukraine, make it part of the EU, and make it part of NATO. After like years and years of the Russians saying, you better not do that. In fact, when the fall of the Soviet Union came about and negotiating peace treaties and stuff, and former Warsaw Pact countries, they said, yeah, one of the promises the U.S. imperialism made towards Russia was that they would not expand NATO into the former Warsaw Pact nations. Well, of course, that was a lie, because now Poland and some of the other countries are part of NATO. And they kept pushing the frontiers of NATO closer and closer to the Russian border. And eventually the Russians saw this as a security threat. And it wasn't only nukes that they were putting in there. They were putting in all these biolabs. We're talking about COVID and what happened in Wuhan, China,
Right.
with the manufactured bioweapons of the COVID. Well, they were making, they call it gain of function, where they take viruses and germs found in nature, and they kind of like mess around with the DNA and RNA to make them even more deadly, so they can figure out how to make vaccinations against them. They call it gain of function, or see what they could do with them.
And they wanted to do that somewhere far away from the U.S., like in Ukraine, where if anything happens, it would be the Ukrainians who would die and not Americans, I guess, right?
Right, and it's also easier to make it into a delivery weapon against the Russians,
Yeah.
and the U.S. has signed numerous. And the sad thing is that the U.S. has signed numerous treaties against bioweapons, and yet we have that bioweapons lab off the eastern tip of Long Island.
Yeah.
And how they say, like, the United States have violated every single treaty it's signed with the American Indians.
Yeah.
Well, the United States has violated every single treaty they sign with everybody. When don't they violate a
interviewing Paul Gilman here from the Bronx Greens on La Voz Latina. Paul, there's a statement that you said from part of the Bronx Greens regarding the Ukraine war.
No, the entire Bronx Greens are
Yes.
against sending weapons.
Right.
So because Howie was running around making these pro-proxy war statements, that we felt the need to make a statement countering him because we don't want to be branded with the iron that he's being branded with. Okay, so he's the pro-proxy war.
Right.
Okay, so the statement from the Bronx Greens is, I'll just read the preamble,
Sure.
and the rest is bronxgreenparty.org.
Right.
The Bronx Greens make this statement in solidarity with the anti-war left in North, Central, and South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia, and the Pacific Islands. The Bronx Greens are against the war in Ukraine, and we refuse to cooperate with the U.S. imperialist NATO war machine that forced this war upon the people of Eastern Europe while creating dire consequences for the rest of the world. Those consequences include a potential nuclear holocaust, the ecological destruction of one of the world's most important food resources, deaths of hundreds of thousands of people from conventional war, all the needless hardships that all other countries are suffering due to this war, and the sacrificing of democracy and the creation of new military dictatorships. The Bronx Greens hope that a worldwide people struggle will defeat these imperialistic designs, leading to worldwide democracy and a systemic change wherein new governments will be responsible for the needs of the people and not act as the tools of national and international plutocrats.
Very good, Paul. So there's a very clear statement, and also basically it is an anti-war statement. And I have to, in my opinion, if it were not for all that military help which the United States and NATO, the U.S. puppet NATO, is giving to Ukraine, this war would have ended 3 or 4 months as soon after it started. In
That's
fact,
true.
apparently Zelensky actually did want to negotiate, and he had been negotiating, and it was the U.S. and NATO who forced him to step back because the United States has this fantasy, and there's something, Paul. The U.S. feels that they are debilitating Russia in this war, but actually, I think they're not seeing something. What's happened is that unlike the United States, which has been in one war after the other since after World War I. After World War I, they went into Central America, Nicaragua, El Salvador. They invaded Haiti. They invaded countries all over the Middle East. Then there was the Korean War. There was the Philippines, where they killed over 3 million Philippines. There was and so on and so forth. Afghanistan, uh, 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 Iraq, and so on. What During all of these 100 years, the United States has been in perpetual war, so its military is always up to date. The Russians, after World War II, they've been at peace. The only war they had for a couple of years was precisely in Afghanistan, which was a short a war, a couple of years there when they intervened in Afghanistan to defend a pro-Marxist government. However, they've been at peace since then. So that actually their military was pretty, I would say, pretty rusty. Now with this war in Ukraine, which actually the United States is the one that's forcing Ukraine to fight more, and therefore the Russians more. The Russians are becoming more polished at military tactics. So this is something that if the U.S. were to think it over well, they're actually hurting their own interests, I believe.
Oh yeah, on numerous levels. Now, people criticize Scott Ritter, but he does make a lot of good points, and he does tell you some of the tactical things. They revised. Like as technology changes, you have to revise your tactics,
Yeah.
and so with all of these modern weapons, they revise their tactics to reflect the new in the field military situations.
Yeah, and for people who do not know who Scott Ritter is, he is a former Marine, former military man, and he's been, a patriotic American all his life, but right now he pretty much sees that the U.S. Is the one that is intervening there. Also, they should let stick their noses out of this war. Also, it has been his position basically, and let what's going to happen between Russia and Ukraine happen, and let there be a peace sooner than later. That's it.
And then BronxGreenParty.org is the Bronx Green Party's website.
Very good.
BronxGreenParty.org.
Very good. And
Okay?
your name is still, as when we started the program, Paul Gilman.
Paul Gilman.
And so, Paul,
One L.
we thank you so much for once again bringing us some information regarding Ukraine, and we'll be speaking with you about other matters also that the Green Party in the Bronx is organizing for
Thank
this
you.
year and also for next year's elections. So, warm embrace, Paul Gilman, and we'll catch you in the next interview probably in a few more weeks.
Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks to his important voice of reason in this climate of confusion. Thank you, Daniel.
Warm embrace.